designed to kill.
I don't care.
I've killed people before.
You won't hurt me.
You sure about that? Hi, people of the internet. This is Lucia and this is my channel where I talk about fiction and history and pop culture, and today, vampiric boyfriends and female autonomy. Really rolls off the tongue. Changes in representation in film and TV have shaped what people picture when they hear the word vampire, and in turn, I would argue, how they perceive the real things that vampires represent. Like, this doesn't help the point that vampires are terrible monsters that you should avoid at all costs. In my previous video on vampires, I looked at the history of the vampire as an aristocrat. But today, we are going to talk about how that intersects with the trope of the vampire as a romantic interest. Specifically, a male romantic interest, because it's the most common type, and I have some theories on why. So let's dig in. Since the 1990s, vampires have become omnipresent romantic leads, especially in teen and young adult media. Which is so interesting. Most vampire boyfriends share some common traits. They are beautiful, brooding, morally conflicted, often with a dark past, and protective to the point of possessiveness. They carry an air of mystery and excitement and danger. In recent stories, they have been softened to be dangerous but ultimately redeemable boys. And I say boys in quotes because usually they're older than a fucking forest, they just look young. They need to be tamed, which makes them fitting of the bad boy or I can fix him trope. The dichotomy lover monster is what fuels the love of the heroine as a decisive tool in redeeming his darker instincts. Notice that I say heroine because these stories are usually targeted at a mostly female heterosexual demographic. The message is something like, if your love is strong enough and you are, special enough, you'll be able to save this man from himself. So, what do women and girls find attractive in these archetypes? What is at play in the fantasy at a subtextual level? And how does it relate to real-life trends that we're seeing in the present gender discourse? Let's have a look, shall we? I believe that you don't need to seek obscure references or conspiracies to understand social realities. So in this video, I'm not going to unearth any arcane vampire stories. We're going to the basics. So let's talk about the king of vampires. In Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, the vampire exerts his powers over women, namely Lucy Westenra and Mina Murray, later Harker, through means of hypnotic seduction. To give you a quick recap, Dracula tells a story as old as time. A rich guy wants to buy property in London. To that end, he hires Jonathan Harker, a young English solicitor who travels to Transylvania to assist him. Jonathan soon realizes that he is a prisoner in the castle, as Dracula is a vampire. Dracula then travels to England to check out his new house, and there he finds his first victim in Lucy Westenra, a friend of Jonathan's fiancée, Mina. Lucy is attacked repeatedly, wasting away until she dies, and then she becomes a vampire. Unsurprisingly, she is then killed. Dracula then targets Mina, forcing her to drink his blood, creating a psychic bond between them. But Mina doesn't die, which means that she doesn't become a vampire, like Lucy did. Dracula hunts the women in dream-like states, where they are both fearful and irresistibly drawn to him. And the act of drinking each other's blood can be read as a grotesque metaphor for intimacy. And we can infer that he's done this before, because he lives with 3 female vampire minions in his castle. They are usually referred to as Dracula's brides, but their relationship in the novel is deliberately ambiguous, with a hint of incest. 2 of the brides are described to physically resemble Dracula, and the other bride rests in a tomb that is extra luxurious, something befitting of a consort, implying that she could be Dracula's wife and the other 2 brides' mother. To drive that incest point home, the brides are usually infantilized in their behavior. They are overtly sexual but twistedly playful, somewhat rebellious in their relationship of servitude to Dracula, mirroring power dynamics present in parent-child relationships. They rarely leave the castle, and it's the Count who provides them with victims, often children and babies. This is used to emphasize how unnatural and evil these women are, by placing them as the polar opposite of the mother archetype. The natural order of things, where the mother nurtures the baby, is reversed in this case, when the female vampire eats the baby to nurture herself. So we can see early on that the trope of the vampire as a male seducer leans on submission obtained through A. A confusion of the senses in the case of Lucy and Mina, or B. An exchange for protection and subsistence in the case of his brides. In more recent versions, where the woman willingly consents to the relationship with a vampire, submission is still present, but it's often disguised as a byproduct of the vampire's protectiveness. The vampire boyfriend is concerned about the woman's fragility as a human in a world of supernatural beings, which justifies certain controlling attitudes or behaviors. Her humanity makes her weak, but also pure. Being turned into a vampire is a solution to that vulnerability, but the change is portrayed as a terrible sacrifice. Purity and righteousness need to be forfeited to attain knowledge and power. It's the loss of innocence trope, the fall, Adam and Eve, all that jazz. The woman needs to sacrifice parts of herself that are perceived to be sacred, which also makes it an obvious metaphor for virginity. In Lucy and the Brides, we see that submitting to the vampire means becoming a brutal, twisted version of a woman who has a voracious sexual appetite and kills babies instead of giving birth to them. This caricature of a bad woman made the wrong decision by submitting to the seducer. So the moral of the story, even though she doesn't really have a choice in it, seems clear. Don't submit. Keep your independence. Independence is good. And this mirrors the moral of the vampire myth as a metaphor for how the wealthy classes parasitize the lower classes. Sure, rich people are alluring and refined and have beautiful things, but ultimately, they're leeches who will steal your life force and exploit you. So keep your senses. However, because the vampire myth is deeply bourgeois and the bourgeoisie is deeply patriarchal, it would be dangerous to have women take this message to other situations in life, say, their submission to men at large. See, as a virtuous woman in Victorian England, you were not supposed to submit to the sensual foreign aristocrat. You were supposed to submit to your boring British husband, who might not be much to look at, but at least he doesn't have a harem. So, ultimately, the message falls under be faithful to your man, don't get sidetracked by wealthy, attractive foreigners, or else, instead of beware of seductive but predatory men. In the last 30 years, the negative consequences of engaging with a vampire have been downplayed in favor of a much more benign narrative that is nonetheless cemented on the same basic principles. He is not anymore the boy you tell him not to worry about, he is your man. So the message eliminates the tension by merging both sides. Be faithful to your seductive but predatory man, and maybe he will become some kind of husband? But if the vampire is so terrible and oppressive, why do women and girls like this trope? Let's use Bella Swan as a case study. In Twilight, there are no downsides to being a vampire. None. Being condemned to eternal darkness? No thanks, we spark under the sun. Can't come into a house uninvited? I've been watching you sleep from inside your room for 2 months. Forced to drink human blood to survive? Fuck that, we can be vegetarians and eat animals instead. If you have somehow managed to exist on the internet and avoid Twilight, here's a quick recap of the plot. Bella Swan is a 17-year-old American girl who moves to Forks, Washington to live with her dad. There, she meets Edward Cullen, a mysterious and shiny classmate who turns out to be a vampire. Edward lives with a group of other vampires who have an incredibly weird and incestuous family dynamic. This family, the Cullens, unironically call themselves ethical vampires, or vegetarians, because they drink the blood of animals instead of humans. Edward and Bella fall in love, and what ensues is 4 books of artificially created tension and a bunch of shenanigans to delay the moment where they can finally be together forever, as you know they will from book 1. The Cullens have immense generational wealth, and being a vampire is not an issue almost ever in their everyday life. They are simply hot, rich people with supernatural powers and a house that looks like a deconstructed yacht. Is it understandable that Bella desperately wants to become one of them? Of course it is. I mean, this is Forks, Washington. The Cullens are for sure the most interesting thing in a 1,000-mile radius. Where would teenagers hang out here? As a European, I'm just horrified by how hostile this place is for anyone who isn't a car. So she loves Edward, and everything that comes with Edward.
I've had to face death and loss and pain in your world, but I've also never felt stronger. Because it's my world, too.
So it's not just about me.
No.
She is absolutely bewitched by these people, and Edward, who in the vampire boyfriend archetype fashion is obsessive and protective to the point of being a creep, is giving Bella a kind of attention that she's never received in her life. I don't mean just romantic attention, I also mean something akin to parental attention. In the book, it's implied that Bella was parentified heavily by her mother, and I would argue that has a really deep impact on her self-esteem and what she wants and expects and believes she deserves in her relationship with Edward. How could I leave my loving, erratic, harebrained mother to fend for herself? Of course, she had Phil now, so the bills would probably get paid, there would be food in the refrigerator, gas in her car, and someone to call when she got lost. But still, when she got lost, not if. Like, what is this woman doing? Now that her mom has someone else to take care of her, she perceives herself to be an obstacle to her happiness. And her mom just rolls with it, which I find brutal. What I mean to say is, this is a vulnerable girl. She is isolated and has been made to behave in ways that didn't correspond to her age all her life. So her maturity level is odd. On the one hand, she can handle herself because she was put in those positions. But on the other hand, she hasn't really gone through the development stages that would be normal for her age. Things like being careless, making mistakes, liking someone, being liked back, your first kiss, hanging out with friends. She didn't have those. And suddenly, the hottest, richest, most mysterious guy in school takes an interest in her. Not just that, but she discovers through him that there is magic in the world, that there are supernatural beings that live forever and have superpowers. And he is a door into that world that is extraordinary. Of course she wants that, like she's never wanted anything before. Of course. And also, here's the thing. Being chosen feels nice. Everyone wants to be chosen because everyone wants to be loved. And being chosen by someone who is perceived to be elite feels even nicer. Because in transactional terms, and we're going to talk about how incredibly transactional this relationship feels, if your partner is worth a lot and they choose you, that reflects on your value as well. For a teenager with low self-esteem, that is so important. Because teenagers are constantly evaluating social hierarchies. Who is the popular one? Who is left out? I mean, so much of teenage media revolves around this. And also, this vampire, you know his secret. You know him intimately. This otherwise invulnerable being. That's also a kind of power, and it feels nice. So it's no wonder Bella is brimming with desire for all of this. Edward, vampirism, the Cullens, the whole lot. And you know what comes in hand with that desire? Fear. Her insecurities take center stage, and there is one that I feel is incredibly telling of one of the core issues that I want to discuss. Bella Swan is obsessed with aging. He's 117 and she's 17. But she's concerned about her own age. She couldn't give a flying fuck about the actual age gap, which is... But she doesn't want to look older than him. She's desperate to be turned into a vampire ASAP, like yesterday. On her 18th birthday, she's looking for signs of aging in the mirror that would widen the visual gap between her and Edward. I was older than Edward, 18, and Edward would never be. Even when I looked 40, he would still be 17, and it would always look like he was too young for me. Why is that?
Dating an older woman, huh?
Because she's aware that as a woman, her perceived value is tied to her youth and her looks. From what I can remember, her anxiety is not really problematized. It's more of a fact of life. Bella knows that relationships where the woman is visibly older than the man are frowned upon. But the book doesn't make her question her insecurities or challenge her assumption. This is just a motivation for her, a timer. Bella can't bear to think that the attention that she's finally getting will be taken away. I think this fear reveals a lot about how Bella perceives their relationship in transactional terms. He's rich, he's beautiful, he's powerful, he has a cool family, he's immortal, he's saving her. By choosing her, she's being saved from regular, boring, ordinary life.
Because I'm not normal. I don't want to be.
What is more, in his obsessive protectiveness, he is giving her the space to be clumsy and irrational and helpless, like the child she couldn't be. So she doesn't perceive anything remotely predatory in this old man stalking her like his life depends on it. She's not particularly creeped out by the fact that he desperately wants to kill her. She feels like she's won the lottery. So what does she bring to the table? Because her upbringing taught her that love is not unconditional. She needs to deserve it. And the first imperative for deserving love as a woman is being young and pretty. And she doesn't perceive herself to be pretty, so she better be young. And that is at the core of all these relationships where a dependency and a big power imbalance exist. He is in a position of power, and she's terrified that he'll find someone better. And I would like to go back to how vampires are often a metaphor for the higher classes, because this relationship exemplifies a power imbalance at that level as well. Edward's money is not a primary theme in Twilight. It's not a highlight in why Bella is in love with him. That would be distasteful. That would make her a gold digger, and our Bella could never. But we're regularly reminded that he's loaded. And if the supernatural plot was adding even the slightest confusion to the nature of this relationship, 50 Shades of Grey, which started as a Twilight fanfic, basically removes the vampire bit so that we can focus on what really matters.
When's the last time you went shopping?
Houston, a week ago.
What'd you buy?
An airline.
So I think that this can be read as a marrying rich situation because it literally is. When they finish school, they get married and they go on to live off the Cullen's fortune. She doesn't continue studying, and it's implied that she's not interested in a career either. She becomes a mom and is economically dependent on him. She's turned into a vampire, which in some ways makes the relationship a bit more equal, like she doesn't need to be protected by him all the time. But it also implies that she's basically stuck with these people for eternity. Because all her loved ones are going to die in what she's going to perceive as a very short time. Like all of her family and friends are going to be gone. So what happens if down the line she realizes that she doesn't want to be with this man anymore? With eternity ahead of you, it's really only a matter of time. Immortal as she is, would Bella Swan start working if she ever divorced Edward Cullen after everyone she knew is dead and she only has his family to rely on? With a high school diploma from 50 years ago, no work experience or marketable skills? In this economy? Of course, this is a silly example, but these are things that happen to real people all the time. Economic dependency is very dangerous and something that women have actually had to battle to have, and many still don't around the world. So, not very cool. Okay, finally, let's talk about Astarion. For those of you who are not into video games, Astarion is a character in Baldur's Gate 3, a fantasy RPG from 2023 that has won a ton of awards and has become an obsession for many. Throughout the game, you meet characters who accompany you, and you can have different relationships with them, including romantic relationships. Astarion is one of those companions. He's a vampire spawn who has been a slave to his vampire master for 2,000 years. When Baldur's Gate came out, the internet spiraled into a craze of utter, unrelenting horniness towards him because, well...
It's none of my business, of course. I wouldn't want to intrude. Watch, maybe, but never intrude.
I love Astarion as a character. I think he's beautifully written and acted, and he conveys a very nuanced and compelling portrayal of ST. We don't often see male characters in media that have experienced ST, so it's honestly great to see something so beautifully crafted. In the game, there are two paths that Astarion can follow narratively. Either he deals with his trauma in a painful but healthy way, and learns to trust in others, stop hating himself, and become more compassionate, Or he doesn't. He continues to engage in harmful coping mechanisms and ultimately becomes his abuser and repeats the cycle. The end step of the second path leads to him ascending, a process that implies gaining certain powers at a terrible cost. Again, the loss of innocence trope. Both endings are very gripping and interesting from a narrative perspective. Both are nuanced, realistic depictions of what can happen to a trauma survivor. But when he ascends, there is a huge change in his personality. If you're romancing him, he goes from being increasingly trusting, vulnerable, loving, and genuinely attached to you, to domineering, manipulative, and untruthful.
Everything is about power. Sex, relationships, violence. They're all just different forms of control. And now you think you can stand there and tell me how to feel? Because what? Because you care?
Where Spawn Astarion sees you as an equal, Ascendant Astarion sees you as a treasured possession or pet.
What can I do for my dearest pet?
Personally, I don't have anything against Ascending Astarion. I believe you should feel free to explore in a game things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily do in real life. By the same logic, playing as an evil character doesn't make you an evil person. However, I do feel things get a little bit murky when you fail to recognize certain traits that Ascended Astarion shows as abusive. And I've seen that online a lot. It really creeps me out how the charisma of the character is obscuring his darker traits. Like, sure, he is much more dominant after ascending, and some people love that, but it's the lack of awareness of what abusive or controlling behaviors look like that honestly scares me, because the issue is that it doesn't just happen in the game. Research from many different countries has been showing a trend in the last 15 years or so of people, especially teenagers, having increasingly more difficulties recognizing abuse when they experience it. 70 to 80% of women who experience abuse do not perceive themselves as victims. Among adolescents and young people, recognizing abuse is more difficult since abusive behaviors can be mistakenly interpreted as romantic behaviors. For example, jealousy. This is also because psychological violence is more common in this age group. Furthermore, the recognition of sexist behaviors decreases when the perpetrator is a partner or when there is attraction towards that person. So, it's a problem. Is the situation portrayed in the game as extreme or as serious as any of this? No. Would I have the narrative or the character be any other way? No. I think it's brilliant as it is. Should you be allowed to enjoy it? Absolutely. Even the parts that are, for lack of a better word, problematic. Go on. Enjoy the fantasy of having a toxic boyfriend. The game is the safe space for it. Get your fill of the narcissistic bastard. But let's not distort what's being represented here, because the writing is very deliberate. Context is key. And this is the context that we're living in. Like it or not, we're seeing a regression in the opinions and beliefs about female autonomy. We can't extract fiction from it because reality and fiction shape each other. So we need to engage with it critically. Desire is something that is constructed and influenced by so many things. And you can't desire things that are not so good for you. Sometimes you even need to engage with them because mistakes are important. They're an important part of life. The aim is that those mistakes don't cause irreparable damage. The vampire romance enacts a fantasy of male dominance and female submission that can be presented as attractive because dominance also comes with attention, protection, and status. The vampire is usually portrayed as powerful, sensual, beautiful, and a member of the elite, so he doesn't lack desirable qualities. And fiction helps us visualize strengths, but we need to engage critically with what we see. Otherwise, we risk romanticizing behaviors that are better suited as a warning. Thank you so much for staying with me throughout the whole rant. If you enjoyed the analysis, don't forget to give these a like and let me know what you think in the comments. Maybe you can add some points that I missed, or maybe you completely disagree with me. Either way, it will be very interesting to know. And if you want to stay up to date with my upcoming videos, do subscribe. Alright, bye!